and I think it's, you know, it's really good to see, especially more families getting out and using the moor. So this Challacombe's basically a mile square. And we feel incredibly lucky. It's really famous for its archaeology. And the Duchy bought Challacombe from the Powderham estate in 1910, I think. Or that was when it was finalised to bring all of there were 5 farms here, and they were all brought together under one holding. And so we've got on the east side, the farm runs up to the top of Hamel Down, and that area that's shaded in yellow is common land, and the farm then runs over. We've got a quarter of Grimspound, and then it goes across to Susans at the back. So this gives us a big old area. And one of the great things about the Duchy buying it is lots of people complain about the Duchy and they say, oh, but the Duchy never spend any money on anything. But what's really fantastic about the Moaning Challacombe is they didn't invest any money, but what that meant was it left this amazing archaeology in place. And we've got this, you know, the blue area is all archaeology, and it's never been, well, it hasn't been ploughed in modern times or improved, so it hasn't been fertilised or limed, which has meant that for us, when we wanted to go organic, it was an incredibly easy thing to do, really. And you've got these soils that haven't been disturbed for hundreds of years. And so you've got amazing soil mycorrhizal communities and things that mean you get great species that need a longevity of time, which we'll go on to later. So more or less everything that's blue, you can't dig up, you can't put in a fence post or lay a pipe or anything without getting scheduled monument consent from Historic England. And what that does is lots of people would see that as a constraint, but we think, well, it stops you doing things and then regretting it afterwards. So you have to plan a lot more and think about what you're doing with your farming. There were a lot of fences historically, and as you drive through Challacombe on the road, people go, whoa, there's a lot of fences here. But it's because the actual, if you look at the historic field pattern, the road was nothing to do with the fences. They came in, well, with the wall boundaries. The roads came in much, much later than the field pattern. And that's why, and with modern livestock jumping over walls, we just haven't got enough stone to make the place stock proof. So we need to use wire fences, which is really unfortunate. So these are some of our lynchets. So these are field terraces. This is taken by Mark using his drone, which he really loves. And if anybody's interested in using drones for photography, then he's got really into it. So, and in this photograph, which is taken on an icy day back during the winter, you've got on low light as well. You can see that you've got the ancient field systems, which are the up on the hill above the wall line, the top wall line. You can see there are lines of old reeves, which are part of a field pattern. They're pretty faint, but seeing as they're the best part of 2,000 years old, I think they're pretty amazing that you can see them at all. And then you come down to the later stone walls and the lynchets that you can see. And the lynchets were ploughed terraces. So there were people out ploughing with oxen, and they ploughed up and down and up and down. And they were growing an amazing range of crops up here: oats, rye, triticale. And those things were all stored as well here. And they would have provided a lot of food for people that were living here, but also people who were coming up and using this area and prospecting for tin, because this area has been important from prehistoric times for the tin mining. You have to be really careful when you're driving around on the top of the hill, because there are little dips that are sort of waist deep, and they were little borrow pits where people were off prospecting for tin. A long time ago. And up in the top right-hand corner, you can see a pound, which is a little fortified structure with a little house platform in it. And so they would have had a secure place to keep animals away from predators, and presumably stop predators eating your children and things like that. Which, the shot also shows a really nice picture of the scrub up through the valley bottom. And so we love a bit of scrub, because for us it provides shelter and shade for our animals, which is increasingly important with climate change. And it also allows us to have places it's fantastic for wildlife. It provides an amazing array of minerals and things as well, because the depth of the plants drag up minerals that are washed down through the soil profile. So you'll sometimes find animals grazing on the leaves of shrubs, and they'll completely strip the leaves off one particular shrub, and it must have something in it that's really special to them. It begins to build up that idea of the array of habitats that we've got here on the farm. And this is a much higher drone shot showing that this is the back facing Susan's Wood. So we call it the back of the farm. You can see the lynchets are really extensive, how they're wrapping around the hill. And on those lynchets, we have a lot of European gorse coming. And the European gorse looks great. The trouble with it is it's like bracken. It's highly invasive, and as the roots of the gorse and the bracken go down, their roots churn up the stratigraphy of any archaeological deposits there, and they put the deposits into the wrong place as they sit in the soil profile. So from an archaeological point of view, it would be better for that gorse to not be so dominant. But we're organic, and so spraying isn't possible. Cutting, it seems to really enjoy. It just seems to get stronger and stronger. And so we do use swaling, so controlled burning with, a big group of us going out and making sure that it's not going to turn into a wildfire. But it is that thing of, there's something about being very anti, things that cause carbon or problems with carbon and releasing it into the atmosphere. We're very careful with fossil fuels and things. There's something a bit odd about burning things, which we're trying to come to terms with. If anybody knows an organic way of controlling gorse, we'd love to hear from you. We've got this amazing heather up on the top of the hill as well, really good for overwintering raptors. I'm sure lots of people go up there and see them, and there's a lovely walk across the top of the hill. And sometimes on a sunny day in the spring, it's an incredible place to go, because you look down and you can see just how the hills unfold going down. You can see the sea, which is just amazing to be stood on the middle of Dartmoor. Seeing the sea just seems perfect to me. So you can see how this is an ancient pound that has been sort of subsumed into the landscape. There would have been an ancient trackway going through, and it shows, because it's a track, it shows that this wouldn't have been a defensive feature, apparently, according to Andy Crabb at the Dartmoor National Park, and I believe him because he knows everything. And you can see that the pound goes both sides of the new public road, and part of it got subsumed into the field boundary. And it's great to think about how important that landscape is, not just for us now, but for future generations. And the archaeology sort of builds the backbone of the habitats on the farm. So our wildlife designations, we're not so heavily designated, so we don't have very much where you've got wildlife designations and scheduled ancient monument status, luckily, because that would make it really difficult. The yellow up through the valley is the county wildlife sites, and they're for the marsh fritillary butterfly. And the green is Triple SI, which is part of the East Dartmoor Triple SI SAC. And that's common land, and it's not under any agreement. And it's also got areas of blanket bog on it as well, and some very nice moorland flushes that are degrading at the moment. there's this bit of a push on our commons around here to put more animals out because people are unsure about what's happening. And so there's a little bit of a sort of strange turf war that's beginning to happen up here, where you're seeing a lot more animals, where people are trying to collect, well, make sure that they get their rights and future payments. So that's sort of directly in conflict with the management of the SSSI and the special features of it. And it means that anybody who wants to get into commoning, it's quite difficult because there's not very much grazing out there for people to share. So this is my favourite slide. So remember, all of these pictures were taken on the farm. We have our rose pasture, which is really important for the marsh fritillary butterfly, but we've also got this fantastic bog hoverfly as well. I just think he's incredible, but I can never say his name, so I'm not going to bother. And we have a ringing project with the BTO. And so we've got records going back now for 12 years of ringing here at Challacombe, which is really nice. And when you have birds, we've got a good redstart population, and we've also, so we can see from the ringing project, from recaptures, how many redstarts are coming back time after time. So that's really nice for us to be able to build up that picture of where the redstarts are nesting, what kind of habitat they need close together, what is their preference, and then for us to manage for those species. So we also do things like when we're managing our bracken, we roll the bracken, we make sure that we do it very late in the season so that we're not hitting any, well, we're trying to avoid nests and for the ground nesting birds, but also that we keep well away from the walls, which are, you know, they're important for the tiny birds that I've completely forgotten the name of, that cuckoo's name, meadow pipits, those are the ones. Well done, my beautiful assistant. And they're really important that they have a wall with nice amount of cover on. Lovely shot of marsh fritillary butterfly, always gorgeous to see them. You know, a couple of weeks' time, hopefully they'll be out and flying, and people will start, lots of people come and see them because we've got open public access on our rose pastures. And one of the things that Mark's lovely brother bought us a wildlife camera, and one of the first things we caught a shot of was of this amazing otter on our river, and we were really, really pleased with that. And the thing about otters is they need a really big territory, and we're forming a cluster group, which I'll talk about in a bit. And one of the things that was brought to us together as a group is around the marsh fritillary butterfly and the needs of that butterfly across a wide landscape. And also everybody's really chuffed with the picture of the otter, because out of 10 farmers, none of us have ever seen an otter. We might have seen some otter spraint, but you know, and the thing is this isn't just our otter here at Challacombe, this belongs to all of us because we're all on the same river. And it's quite nice to have species like that, like the marsh fritillary and the otter, that are really quite conspicuous and really special, for bringing groups of farmers around to coalesce, to have something you can do together as a shared project. It's been really exciting for us to do that. And yeah, I can't say how important it is to make farmers feel that they're part of something bigger for wildlife. So this is another aerial shot from the drone, showing slightly further down the valley, and this shows what happens on our farm through the year, really. So we have the livestock barns over in the bottom left-hand corner, and this is where we keep our young lambs. So this year's lambs that are born now in April will have access to an old stone barn through the winter. And that's because they're just not physically strong enough. They haven't got a good enough fleece to stay out full time. So they like to go in the wet and then go back out again. Everything on our farm's got access to the outdoors all the time. So nothing, well, unless you're poorly, you never get shut in. There's also a barn where we store our hay and straw. and a cattle barn where our cattle are fed. So they're fed undercover so that you don't get any wash of nutrients, because when cows stand around eating, they poo. And when cows poo, they poo a lot, basically. And so they're fed undercover, and we collect that poo, and Mark makes a big heap of it, and we hot compost it down, and then we spread that manure on our meadows, which are the bright green ones that you can see at about 2 o'clock on the 2 o'clock, yeah, well, the top right hand corner. So those bright green fields with those are spread with manure from the cows, but they don't have any artificial fertilizer, and so there's a huge amount of nutrients in that system, and they do look bright green and fertilized, but it's just literally organic manure composted down, so when it goes on, it just acts like rocket fuel to grow the grass for the next year's crop of hay. And what we do is we look carefully at how much hay we can grow on our grass fields. It's about 20 hectares of grass, and then we adjust our numbers of cattle and sheep to reflect that amount of hay that we can grow. We don't buy hay in because we want to have a sustainable system that we can just keep the number of animals that can be sustained on the farm. And so that means we have a much lower density of livestock than most people. And it means that you don't have to buy much in, so your costs are low, and you're using everything that the farm can produce, basically. And this allows you to have areas that you can spare for nature. And so you can see in this shot our rose pastures. Everything that's a little bit rougher is rose pastures, and they're linked up with areas of scrub, areas of planting for woodland. And we're restoring, there's a rough, in amongst the bright green grass fields, there's a rougher field, which is a really good species-rich pasture that we cut, and then we spread the seed from that field back into our hay meadows that we're feeding to our cows to try and make more upland hay meadows, because they're such a rare resource. And our rose pasture, we're really proud of, to be honest. We graze it from the end of August through to October with cattle only. It used to be overgrazed with cattle throughout the year. Really, really fragile habitat. Ours are dominated by Molinia purple moorgrass, but if we graze them just with cattle at a very low rate, so maybe a cow per hectare, then we're ending up with this amazing diversity. And the longer we're doing it for, the better diversity we're getting. So the sheer number of plants, the number of orchids, but also we've got other things coming in, like a big increase in the area of bog bean in particular, and sundew, lots and lots of sundew, and that's great as food plants for other insects, and then the birds feed on the insects, and the joy continues. And we need the cattle for this. It would be a welfare issue if we were to put sheep in here. It's too wet, and sheep, because the sheep has a short tongue, they only nibble. But a cow has a long tongue, and if she's got grass that's long enough, she'll wrap her tongue around the grass and rip it out. And what that means is they sort of wrap their tongue around, rip, take a couple of steps, wrap and rip. And so you end up this amazing heterogeneity of the sward. You get bits that are tall and rough, and you get other bits that are quite tightly cropped. And so what that means is you then create these amazing niches for things to come in, and you end up, it's a new word I've heard this week that I've not heard before. Apparently the little mark that a cow makes with its foot that then fills with water is called a pollock. And I think this might be a joke, but I believe it because I was told by somebody who is quite eminent. And so Hi. So that was Cat knocking the computer over. I hope somebody will wave to me and show that we're still broadcasting. Is there anybody there but me?
Yeah, we can see you, Naomi. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a cat. It was a bad cat, right? Right. So when cows do their stepping, apparently it's called pollocking, and it's an actual thing that's really good for creating a niche for new plants to colonize into. So you have some things that can't compete with, especially with Millennia. And it's also, it's proving to be quite important for natural flood risk management. So each little individual pollock will hold a pint or two of water. And although that doesn't sound very much, when it all comes together, it all adds up to something quite special. So, you know, cows play an important role in the management of the farm for species. And they're not economic at all. They actually lose quite a lot of money, but we're made up for that with our agri-environment payment. So it's worth us keeping the cattle for those agri-environment payments. If we didn't have those payments, it wouldn't be worth keeping them. But we need them for these amazing habitats. The other thing we have, this is our species-rich hay meadow, which was 10 years ago, this field's called the gorse field, and 10 years ago it was head-height European gorse. And through our agri-environment scheme, we cleared the gorse and then we spread some green hay from a local field, and then nothing happened. And we got a little bit depressed for a short while and wondered, and I thought, I've been telling people to do this for years at work and it doesn't appear to work. And then 2 years later, it just suddenly took off, and you know, everything must have been right. Just amazed me that the seed source stayed there for that time, dormant. And now we're seeing, you know, a really good mix of species coming, and every year it's getting better and better. And the butterfly orchids are just wonderful. And now what it means is we can use this seed on our other meadows, because you know we've lost 97% of our meadows. You know, it's a desperate situation, and everybody can do their bit. You know, I think things like Moor Meadows do an amazing job of raising people's awareness of the plight of meadows, but also encouraging people, you know, if you've got a spare bit of your garden or a public space that you're invested in, go and, you know, have a little meadow. You know, every little helps, and it is really, really important. And these meadows are, we can share the seed with other people as well. So, you know, we've got some seed, people come along and they collect green hay, and we're more than happy for people to do that, because it really is important that it's a community effort. And it's so exciting. You know, you can share stuff with somebody and then you can be part of the joy of them creating their meadow in time. I just love it. We also have a really good selection of bees. Now, so lots of people are into bumblebees, and we had a student who's also my niece who did a BSc dissertation here, and she came and studied all of the sorts of bees that we've got, and we've now got somebody doing a master's in the bilberry bumblebee, because apparently they're very special, but all bumblebees are really great, aren't they? And she would do, when Poppy was doing her recording, she would do a hay meadow walks on a transect, and she was finding sort of 17 different bees, which apparently is really good. And it got us a square on the National Biodiversity database as well for our bilberry bumblebee, which I think of as the buzzy orange one, but apparently there's more to it than that. But bumblebees are a really good way of you sort of showing your general health. Another thing we got, which people get really excited about, are wax caps. So we're a regionally important wax cap site. So they're on the sheep grazed archaeology, where the archaeology is very important. We need for people to be able to see it, and you can just see a bit of a ridge of archaeology behind. And we've got lots of wax caps. Lots of people come up in the winter in the autumn to see them. And so if you ever fancy somewhere to go on a nice damp autumn day, then that's the perfect time for seeing wax caps here. On the top of the hill, the heather is fantastic. We graze it with ponies, but at the back end of the autumn. But apart from that, we leave it to just be and do its thing for the rest of the time. There's areas of Sitka that are coming in from the forest, and that's a constant thing that we have to try and keep on top of. But otherwise, it's a pretty good semi-natural habitat, but it does need that grazing to hold it as heathland and to not go as scrub. A little bit of scrub is great. Lots of scrub shades out other things. So it's that mosaic and gradation that we're after there. So we have lots of public access at Challacombe. Obviously, we've got the road that goes through, and some people like to just walk on the road. The areas that are in yellow are all Crow open access land, so people can go more or less everywhere apart from the hay meadows. And we have a bridleway running through. And we also have quite a lot of permissive access as well. We've upgraded a footpath going out to Susans Wood. So it's for all access. And we encourage lots of people, people are welcome to walk where they like as long as they respect the place. And we enjoy seeing people here, and lots of people come, regularly and have a proper relationship with the farm, which we really enjoy. So we see people, they come for various things. So this was an archaeology group who came out, really interested in tin mining, and they came along and they cleared some around some puddles where the tin used to be crushed. And in doing so, they created a really nice little bit of habitat as well, some short grassland in amongst some bracken. And so we see the archaeology as a benefit, and people love it. And on the right-hand side, we've got Bill Allen from the Dartmoor National Park, who did a medieval pewter smelting day with the Ranger Ralph, the young rangers from the National Park. And that gets a different group of people out here. He was smelting pewter and then pouring it into carved cuttlefish shells with a big fire with small children, and they loved it. And it was all very well organised, actually. I was surprised nobody lost a limb. But we also have a farm open day every year where we invite people to come, drink tea, eat cake, and that coincides with the meadow day as well, when people can come and walk around the meadow. And people come and they buy our fleeces from our sheep, and people make things out of our fleeces, which is amazing. So there's this lady, and she makes these amazing felt sculptures. And somebody took our Black Welsh mounted wool and carded it and cleaned it up and made it beautiful, and then knitted this amazing blanket out of it. It's a real labour of love that, when people bring you things that they've made from the stuff you produce on your farm, it's just incredible, to be honest. This is a shot of the disabled ramblers, or the rolling ramblers, who came for a trip, all parked up in the front field, and went out and took their mobility scooters and went out and enjoyed the easy access path out towards Susans Wood. And as you come onto the farm at each place, there's an information board welcoming people onto the farm and telling them about what's going on and what they might see. And we see this as a good way of promoting our business as well for our beef and lamb, and giving people a sense that they are very welcome, rather than most places where people might feel intimidated and not so sure about, well, whether they should be there or not. So overall, you can see that Challacombe has a huge amount of designations. Apart from the hay meadows in the bottom left-hand corner, there's sort of everything's designated in some way or another. And this makes Challacombe a really special place. In the past, lots of people would think of it as being, being a problem, having all this designation, but we actually see it as a really positive thing. We think that it's going to help us in the future. because we encourage lots of people onto the farm, and those people that do come onto the farm, you know, are our potential customers for the things that we grow and create here. So our animals, we're obsessed with animal welfare, and we couldn't find a farm assurance scheme that was really focused enough on the welfare of the animal, and also on the sustainability of the farm. So this business about only using stuff that you grow yourself on the farm, being organic as a minimum standard, whereas a lot of people would think of organic as being quite a high standard. We've gone with this American organisation called A Greener World. They're really strict, which is what I think farm assurance should be. It should be difficult and onerous, so that people are getting a good product that comes from, you know, healthy food from healthy farms, basically. These are our cows, the beauties themselves. So these guys aren't fenced in. They're in the paddock in front of the house, and they just line about. They don't all have to lie so close together, but they choose to, and they're in little family groups, and the calves are all being watched over, and they can exhibit a really natural lifestyle. They can either walk up to the top of the hill, they can be down in the valley, depending on what they fancy. This makes them very high welfare. They live a really long time, and they're productive. If they don't have a calf one year, then that's fine. You've got past your initial investment of raising a cow. So we don't mind if our cows are slightly less productive not having a calf every year, because they're still useful for conservation grazing. But they can go on until they're 20 years old. So you end up with cows who know where they're living and what they're meant to be doing, you know, in terms of grazing and looking after their babies. And they have amazing characters. And you see them off grazing when it's really pretty cold, and they're trampling on the bracken, on the archaeology, and they kind of do it. They're not hungry. They're just because they're eating hay in the barn, which you can just see on the left-hand side of the picture. They're walking a good distance away from where they're being fed, and they're just grazing a little and trampling bracken, and generally having a nice life out on the moors, which is pretty good for any animal, really. And then they come inside, as I was saying, and they eat the hay that's produced in the meadows, and they're not getting rained on, and they're just, you know, that cycle. You can see what's coming out of the other end of the cow, and then that's the bit that's composted and put back on the hay meadows for the growth the following year. And these are our sheep. We went through quite a few breeds, and we've ended up with these Icelandic Shetland crosses. So it's Henry and Loki down in the left-hand corner. There are rams, and a selection of our ewes in the top left-hand corner. They have these amazing dense fleeces, and they come in lovely, lots of different colours. So you get dark ones and pale ones and spotty ones and all sorts of things. They're really good mums. They love their babies. But their babies are tiny. They're really tough. So they're living out on the grass that grows naturally on the farm. And they might have they do have mineral buckets. That's what they need. And they also really like grazing on the gorse bushes. So you can see over on the left-hand side, there's a gorse bush that's a little bit grazed down. And that's where the sheep will all stand round on a really wet, cold day and nibble at the gorse. But if we had enough sheep to control the gorse, we will have eaten everything else first, because they preferentially graze the grass over the scrub. We bring our sheep into the barns in the winter they come in 2 weeks before they lamb, because they have these tiny little lambs that are probably only 1 kilo maximum. And we don't have any predator control here on the farm. So we've got foxes and badgers and ravens and crows. And these little lambs are very vulnerable to predation when they're small. So we lamb our ewes in the barn, and we keep them in until their lambs are probably a week or so old, and they're strong enough to look after themselves, basically. And that stops us having to do any predator control. And then that keeps on top, it gives you that healthy balance of predators within your food system. And we also have a group of pedigree Dartmoor ponies that come up and do some conservation grazing. So whatever, if the rose pasture is too wet, then these guys can come in and they can graze around and take any of the last of the millennia to create that habitat that's so important, the mosaic within the rose pasture. And then they go out and they graze out some of the grass over by the forest. And this is the area where the shrike was a couple of years ago. And they were feeding, the shrike was feeding on the little beetles, and those beetles are linked to the dung. So you need to have that, you need to have dung to have the beetles, which is great. Every year we also have the pigs, and people seem to really love the pigs. So we eat the pigs ultimately, but people come and they bring their families, including John, who had ham sandwiches near them, which must have been quite shocking for them. And the pigs are around the house usually. If you ever want to see a pig, it is the place to come. And people really enjoy seeing them and interacting with them. But they also go out and they will be up to half a mile away from the house, and they go off. And for people who've read Rewilding, it's pigs are part of a dynamic process. They only scuff up the top of the soil. So the archaeologist is quite happy about them. Well, not quite happy, he seems all right about it. But they do create these new niches and disturbed areas, which are really important to get diversity. And we quite often find little tree saplings in amongst those areas that the pigs are rooted up, because the little trees can take hold. This is part of the things we produce. So we produce lamb and the Icelandic fleeces. So the coat is made into a sheepskin when the lamb is turned into meat. And people really like them because they look a bit Viking, and they've got that Scandi chic thing going on. They're really soft, they're organic tan, they're just a lovely thing, and people seem to really like them. And we also produce this lovely, very lean meats because they're grass-fed their whole life and they're out exercising. And people seem really keen on it, which is lovely. It's lovely to have somebody appreciate the thing that you produce that's also really good for wildlife. So if any of you are interested in buying our beef and lamb, then you can come onto our website or Facebook, and we really appreciate those people who do buy our lamb and beef. And sometimes we have some pork as well. It's that connection between the farm and people actually buying your produce is fantastic for us, to have that recognition that what we're doing is important. We wanted to include something on the Upstream Thinking project, which is a partnership between the Devon Wildlife Trusts and South West Water. It's been really fantastic for us. We've done a lot of work. We had a neighbour who had an issue with silt coming off his farm that was then going into the river on our farm, and it was causing an issue on the salmon redds because the silt it smothers the eggs. And so rather than building a concrete box to catch the silt, the Upstream Thinking project funded a pond to divert the water, and it then runs into the rose pasture to keep it wet, diverting a ditch. So we had a week of a nice man with a digger, and then we ended up with this amazing pond that you can see in the top left-hand corner. So the ditch used to run around the curved field boundary, and now it takes the water across to the right-hand side and it pours out and into the wet, fenny, sort of scrubby rose pasture area. It costs less than a concrete silt trap, and it's an incredible habitat for wildlife. Within a very short time, it was beginning to be colonized. And it's really popular for people. It's open access, so people go down there, and it's becoming quite special for dragonfly watching. And this year we added to that with more Upstream Thinking money to create, to take out a ditch that did run down through the side of the hedge, and to create a series of meanders, and then just let the water flow down across the hillside. So it runs from the left-hand side to the right-hand side down to the pond. It's been amazingly successful. It's a really cheap thing to do. And it's providing more natural flood risk management resilience higher up in the catchment. And that's what will stop the need for more concrete and hard engineering lower down the catchment to prevent flooding of people's houses. And we just think that everything we can do to help with that is it's part of our duty. It's great to do it. It's an amazing thing to do, and it creates more habitat, and it's just really exciting. So this is an area that's between our rose pasture and our neighbour's rose pasture, and Upstream Thinking paid for a digger for a week to come in, and Mark created a series of little scrapes and little ponds, and he's also growing on some Devil's Bit scabious, the food plant of the marsh fritillary butterfly, which we'll plant into this area later this year. And these are temporal ponds. We're not expecting them to stay there forever. We're expecting them to grow over, and then we'll create some more and hopefully expand the area and the quality of that wetland. So this is a shot from above, just showing all the slight little pock marks. And hopefully this will, we're already seeing a lot of water there, and hopefully it'll improve the habitat. And this is another little bog that we've got where the water comes out of an old tin mine. And we used oak planking from Anton Coker over at Sherborton that he took from the Dart Valley Woods. So it's local timber, and it's creating, holding back the water, stopping this little peatland area eroding, and it's creating better habitat, holding water, and it's already within a year it's twizzling with dragonflies and frogs. We do know how to farm frogs. If we had headage on those, that would be great. And it's another thing that we've done through Southwest Water and the Upstream Thinking project is the water bottle refill point, which puts us onto the national map, which is good fun. But it also means that people, realise that we're keen on reducing plastics as well. And we get a lot of people using it, which is really nice. So looking ahead, we wanted to talk just briefly about average farm incomes and why do people go farming. And I think the thing that's really important to think about is how much money upland farmers make and where that money comes from. And I think we need some honesty. So we're looking at the grazing livestock in the less favoured area, which is basically the uplands. And this is 2 years, so it's 1819, 1920. And the blue, the line below £0, is the money that farmers make from agriculture. So this is from your beef and your sheep and your actual farming. So your farming in the LFA loses money hand over fist. The orange is the money that you get from your agri-environment payments to do good stuff for nature. Your diversified income is that tiny little band of grey. It's hardly anything, but the bulk of the money that comes into upland farmers is the basic payment scheme. And so, that's an average of £15,500 a year, and then an average of £23,000 a year. That's a huge amount of your income comes from basic payment scheme, and a huge amount of loss. So that money offsets the loss that you get from your farming enterprise. So that business about, some farmers are making money, but most of them are living off their subsidies. But with the move from coming out of the cap and Brexit and the move of money for public goods, that basic payment money, the yellow bit that everybody's living off, is going to go down, and it's going to be phased out until it's going to disappear completely in 2028. And so you can see the payment bands, how much that will reduce year on year. So it's only 5% off this year, which isn't very much. But, it's not going to be very long until it's half your income will have disappeared. And then people won't have that income to balance up from what they're losing on their farms. So DEFRA said that they're going to invest the money from the reduction of BPS into new forms of payments around this idea of public money for public goods. So it'll be for clean water, clean air, climate change access, and for wildlife. And these are, if they actually carry it through, and I think that the announcements today from George Eustace around peat and trees and the changes to the Environment Bill, that they are going to make those changes. You know, we're beginning to see the start of that. That some farmers are going to really need to think about what they do with their future. We've joined together with a group of farmers locally. There's 10 of us, and we were drawn together first of all around thinking about the marsh fritillary butterfly, because we've all got good populations of marsh frits on our farm, and we came together around that. But then we started thinking wider about the impacts of the reduction of farm subsidies and what that will mean to us as a group, and maybe what we can do to change our farming systems as a group. So whether that's buying stuff together or employing advisors together or all sorts of things. You know, we're thinking about how we can collaborate more than we have in the past to reduce our costs so that we can buffer ourselves against and change our businesses so that we can focus more on the production of public goods. And it's been really nice to be with a group of like-minded farmers that are interested in changing their farms to make them better for wildlife. So these are our amazing bluebells. They're really late this year. You can see them, they kind of swoop down over the hill across the lynchets, and they're incredible. They're just such a sight to be seen. They're just beginning to come. So I'd say in the next 2 weeks, do come and see them, because they're just glorious, and I think they're going to be amazing this year. And we'd love to see you, basically, and we'd love to see everybody, because it's just nice. And it's a special place, and it's too much just for the two of us, so we love to share it with others. On the 27th of June, we've got a farm open day, so that will take people where they can't go normally, so through the hay meadows and the rose pasture. It's free. Come along, park up, have a cup of tea, go for a walk. And then for the 2 weeks after that, we're going to have people can just come, park and help themselves on a self-guided walk. Just come anytime between 10 and 7 o'clock at night. We did it last year and a lot of people came and it was really lovely. You don't have to book or anything, just come along, help yourself and enjoy this special place. If you want, we do a newsletter that we send out to people. If you want to buy meat, you can see what we do at dartmoorfarm.com, or see us on Facebook, or just come and see us and have a chat. It's always lovely to see people. And thank you for this great opportunity. It's been really nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Naomi. That was fantastic. Quite inspirational. One of the things I didn't mention at the introductions, but I've sent everybody a note via the chat line, is that asking questions. If you have any questions, could you send them via the chat to Linda Corkerton, and she's collating them together. So hopefully she's got some in the pipeline.
Quite a lot of questions come through.
Excellent.
Some of them have been answered along the way, but yeah. So I'll just work through them really. I had Andrew and Pia ask, could you sort of define what you mean by the term moss pasture?
Oh, Ross pasture. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it's a really wet meadow. So it's a wetland. So it's peat that's really soggy. So it shakes well. The top of it is, and then it's got a layer of an impermeable layer underneath it, so it holds the water. And then it's dominated by Molinia grass, so a very coarse, rough grass. But then within it, you get these amazing orchids and well, all the flowers that are in the thing. But it is a Molinia, for us, it's a Molinia dominated peat pasture that got really heavily improved after the war, well, during the war.
So that's all Valley Mire.
Yeah.
There's a landscape strip, isn't there, of rose pasture, isn't there, related to the marsh fritillary butterflies, isn't there?
Yes, and that's what all of the farms that are within our cluster group, that's what we're trying to do, because marsh fritillaries, bless them, don't like flying very much, and they get blown around more than anything else. So they like to be able to have their sites quite close together, and that's really important for spreading genetics around, and also they get parasitized as well. So they get, the populations go through these amazing dips and highs, and then so you need to have a good diverse but joined up population for them.
There was also another question about, you mentioned moorland flushes and that they're degrading. Can you explain that a bit?
Right, so the flushes are areas where you've got a water, like a little stream, or just where water comes out from the side of a peaty area. That's how they are here. So and you end up with like a wet bit, and they'll have areas of sphagnum, so domes of sphagnum, and they're quite wet. And then you'll have drier hummocks that will have a bit of heather on. They're an amazing mosaic of hummocks and little pools, basically. So you get an incredible amount of habitat potential within a small area, but they're very fragile because they're very wet. So if you have a lot of ponies or a lot of cattle, they come in and they'll trample on the more fragile species. And it's because there isn't enough places for animals to get to drink. So that's why they go to those areas to get a drink, and then it gets degraded.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned about the butterfly, the bluebells coming up, but Gail had asked when would be a good time to see your orchids?
Come to the flower walk on the 27th. That'd be good.
Okay. I think that's going, your sort of open day and your self-guided trail is going out on our newsletter, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
Simon is going to will be circulating that sort of information. So just
I think that the bog bean, which is that wonderful white flower, sort of frilly, almost looks like an orchid but isn't an orchid, that will be out at the same time this year, because it's beginning to bud up now. So I have high hopes, and people will be able to see that. I'll put a sign up so that will say, look for the bog bean, because they're such a pretty flower.
Yeah, that's a food plant for the bog hoverfly as well. So.
Peter asked, have you ever run a moth trap on the farm?
Yes, we have run a moth trap, but we haven't. We used to have a man from the Tamar Valley who used to come, but we haven't for a while. Would Peter like to run a moth trap here?
Yeah. Colin's got one as well. He'd be happy to run one. I don't know whether Barry Henwood's in the audience today.
Peter would love to come and run a moth trap there.
Yeah, get in touch.
Yeah.
You got lots of offers.
Yeah, it'd be lovely. If you want to run a moth trap and then share it, that would be fantastic. We'd love that. If anybody wants to do anything, really.
Happy to do that.
We like any enthusiast coming along to always find something new we haven't seen before. We had people who come before with a moth trap who've got a motorhome, so they can sort of put it out, stay in our field, and then have to drive up first thing in the morning to check it. So that'd be right as well. So
it'd be good to do.
Yeah, just wait for it to warm up a bit.
Yeah.
And stop raining.
I think you partly covered on the next question when you were talking about some of the sort of changes to the sort of the financing system. But PF has asked, do you have any specific developmental aims for the future, and what local threats to the future of the farm other than global warming?
I think for me, actually, global warming, climate change is the biggest, well, I think it's the biggest threat of all, because what we're seeing is this chaotic weather, and that's really difficult for the livestock to cope with. So it was really warm and dry, went back during the end of the winter, And the animals all went, oh, brilliant, it's the end of winter. So their coats started falling out, and then it started to get really cold, and then not, they haven't got their insulation anymore. And it seems like a really small thing, but then they need more food because, there's just not enough natural food that they could sustain themselves if they still had their coat on, they keep warm. And it's those things that I've not thought about, that with climate change are kind of creeping up on you. And the fact that we're seeing more invasive species. So, what would you would have seen something maybe once in a while, and how it favours things like gorse growth and the bracken. That's a challenge. What we need to do is find something useful to do with the gorse and bracken. A big
that was one of, I had my own little question really, was that I'm aware on a very small scale that some people use bracken as a horticultural mulch, but is that a sort of used? I mean, I don't think it's done very much, is it? But it is.
People have done it and mixed it with wool and made a mulch. One of the challenges is actually harvesting it, in terms of as a sort of thing, because once there's a lot of rocks on Dartmoor where the bracken is, and that will kind of eat any machinery and sort of trash it. So it's finding somewhere flat without rocks where you can cut it, and you will get a few years out of it, but the cutting will actually reduce the vigor of the bracken. So it's one of the things which is quite a challenge, I think, for anybody to sort of make a long-term business out of. But the gorse would be brilliant if you could chip and bale it, because there's just so much heat sort of stored in one gorse bush.
Yeah, any great ideas?
There's a question from Rob, which is sort of related to you talking about grazing again, saying, what is your view of mob grazing? Is there any role for it on your farm?
My view of mob grazing is I think it's fine as long as they've got shelter and shade. I find mob grazing, you use an electric fence to hold animals into a set area for a short time, and the whole idea is they eat a third of the grass, they trample a third, and they leave a third, and it's brilliant, and it can be really good for soil carbon. It doesn't fit within our system because we have so much public access that putting up electric fencing for to do mob grazing is quite challenging, because you then have to people can't walk there basically because there's a huge number of animals. And I kind of have a bit of a problem with it at a personal level. I think that the science for it is really good, the evidence, but I have a bit of a trouble that they can't exhibit their natural behaviours. Our cows they'll spend the morning down in the valley eating a bit of few rushes and scruffing about in the scrub, and then they'll walk up onto the heather in the afternoon, and they're very self-determining, and sometimes one of them will, she wants to take herself off to have a calf. They can't do that in a mob grazing system. They all move along together in a set way, and I think it makes your animals too dependent on you rather than being dependent on themselves.
Tim had asked, I'm not sure whether you mentioned it or not, but Tim had asked about what breed of cows that you're using.
No, we hadn't mentioned it. Sorry. We have a Welsh Black Bull, a pedigree Welsh Black Bull, and our cows are predominantly Aberdeen Angus crosses and North Devon crosses. So they're really hardy, tough cows.
And tasty.
And tasty.
Are they the ones? Are they ones that are commonly used by Dartmoor Hill Farm?
No, they're not very. North Devon should be a lot more common because they're just such a gentle. They're the red ones. They're just such a gentle, easy breed to deal with, and they're really docile, so really easy around people. I don't know why they're not more popular. Well, they're not so popular because they grow slowly, so they're not for popular big businesses.
Yeah, as a sort of native breed, so they used to be they would eat sort of rough grasses, scrub, and sort of cope with the weather without being fed lots of cake in the winter and sort of being. Well, most people's cattle come in during the winter, whereas ours will come in if it's a really rough day, but they stay in the barn. but unless it's really foul weather, they go out during the day and just come in the evening.
Another question from, I think, from Andrew was, how are we going to educate the next generation of farmers to conserve the environment on average farms that have been intensively managed for years?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting question, actually, Andrew. And one that strains my brain a little. I think that we have a bit of an idea in this country that you have to be a farmer, or your dad has to be a farmer for you to become a farmer. But some of the best farmers, Mark is one of the best stockmen I know. He'll spot something in the animals way before lots of people would see it. But Mark doesn't come from a farming background. He's a Torquay boy, for goodness sake. How foreign can you get? But so I don't think you need to come from a farming background. And I actually think that that's part of the excitement for the future, is we'll see new people coming in. And I think that a lot of farmers, I think we'll see more farmers coming in that are more farms for sale as well, and maybe more opportunity. And I'm quite hopeful about that. But I think there's a rump of farmers who aren't going to change. And they'll be really difficult. And I think if they're older and they're not, I think it'll be really tough for them, to be honest, because this fall in the BPS payment is going to mean that they're going to, I think they'll cling on, and I think it will be very hard for them. The easiest thing to do is to change now, basically, and to get, to start thinking about your business and how you're going to start producing public goods and how you're going to add value to your produce. If you're just in the uplands and you're producing commodities like, meat that gets sold to a supermarket, then the future is pretty grim.
Yeah, other people can produce it a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
they've got much better grass growing conditions than we have up here. If you're having to buy in fertilizer and feed, then that puts you at a disadvantage, and you're going to make a loss on every animal. And the idea of sort of intensification, I think some people have sort of got the idea of you just need to work harder, have more animals, and then it'd be all right. That isn't going to work.
No, it's not.
I'll just having a conversation with you in a way, but you're saying you're doing, you've got a group of you looking at the issues, but obviously, what farmers talking to farmer obviously must have a positive impact, really.
Yeah, and it is, we've got some farmers that you wouldn't expect to be, farmers who are pretty intense. Well, they are intensive. They have a lot of inputs, they buy a lot of fertilizer, a lot of food for their animals, and they're just going, we can't do this, we can't do it anymore. And they're also saying, well, we can't do it, but we also don't want to pass it on to our kids like this. We need to have a more sustainable system. And I do think it's going to be farmers talking to farmers that will drive that change. And also agricultural colleges, so that young farmers who go off for an education are being told that production isn't the only way forward.
And I think it is that sort of, more people looking at their costs. But the farm cluster thing, we're working with the other farmers. It's really exciting just seeing the sort of landscape change over such a bigger area. We've got a square mile, but between us, much bigger areas and lots, big sort of areas of catchment, those passes joining up those habitats, more hedges, more trees, more wetlands. It's really exciting. Hopefully the next sort of 5-10 years, we'll see some big changes.
The next question slightly sort of changes the rear a bit, but it says, do you have hen harriers, and how do you manage the habitat to encourage them?
We have overwintering juvenile hen harrier here. So, and they're not on our farm, but they hunt a lot on the heather. We have them in the winter. We just don't do anything. Well, we're very positive about predators. So, they're more than welcome, basically.
I think our ethos is basically just have lots of variation of habitats, so that hopefully they're as niche as for all sorts of things, and you just almost see what comes up, rather than trying to. Marshall Artillery, we do a bit more sort of prescriptive habitat management specifically for them, but generally most of our habitat management is just trying to get that variety in, and from the edges and graduations between the habitats, so there's plenty of space for things.
Another thing we do that we're really keen on is not using ivermec, which is a systemic wormer. So the ivermec, you give it to the animal, to the sheep or the cow, and it kills everything, and it's really cheap. It's ever so effective, but it goes through the animal and then it goes into the soil, and it then you don't nothing, well, anything tries to eat it, it dies basically, and it's it's pretty toxic stuff. So you don't get the beetles and things. So we don't use those wormers. So we have amazing dung flora. You kick over a cow pan and it's just wee, and that forms that base of the food chain. That's so important. You need lots of insects to power all of these things that want to eat something. And so having lots of voles and prey is really important, and that we think the mosaic of habitats and the sheer volume of food is what's important as well. Everybody's welcome, really. Even foxes. People go, oh, you don't want foxes, but foxes have a role to play. They're tidying up, and we don't have any bother with them. We shut our chickens up and we don't let our lambs out until they're bigger. No trouble.
Can I just ask, I had another question in my head where you were talking about public monies for public goods in the new financing system, but does that rely on farmers having a sort of knowledge about their baseline of what they've got and what they could improve on, and would that be an issue for some farmers?
Yeah, but there is an issue for some farmers, but I think that's where knowledgeable advisors come in. So whether it's somebody from the national park or from a farming and wildlife group, or Devon Wildlife Trust's got some fantastic advisors, and they're going out on farms all the time, meeting people and meeting farmers and giving advice. I think there's a role, a commercial role. Farmers in this country aren't used to paying for advice, but if you need more, you wouldn't think twice about paying your accountant. So why wouldn't you pay for wildlife advice if that's what's going to bring in your money for public goods?
And I think farmers are pretty sort of adaptable, and they know what they need to be producing, where it's a certain grade of meat or a certain habitat. I think one of the sort of things you hear from farmers is that under the old schemes are very prescriptive. You have to do X, Y, and Z, irrespective of what the outcome was. So once you did the right steps, you got paid. Whereas the schemes are much more focused on this is what it needs to look like at the end. Then you can speak to your neighbours, find out what's not working, and sort of tinker stuff. And you've got more ownership of what is the whole process, rather than just say, oh, I'm going to put my sheep in there at a certain time of year, my cattle at a certain time of year and out, without really focusing on what you're trying to produce. So hopefully, by becoming more focused on those public goods, and the money coming as a reward for delivering those well, it should encourage people to adapt and learn.
Last question, and then a last comment. Andrew has asked, do you know what bat species you've got on the farm?
We got 14 species. Again, through Devon Wildlife Trust, through the Horseshoe Bat Project years ago, we had a bat detector up for a week, and we got somewhere. I have the results, but I think we had 14 species, including greater and lesser horseshoes came through, with lots of pipistrelles, natterel. Lots.
We know that we've got lots of bats because we're trying to get some building work done on our roof, and we can't because it's full of pipistrelles.
Yeah, that's probably a few holes for them.
But if anybody wants to come up with a bat detector, then we're really up for that.
We have got there's a sort of subgroup of our group with a Bobby Bat group, which is led by a group of people. So we've got a subgroup linked to our Bobby group, so the Bat group.
We're always welcome to either individuals or groups coming up and looking around wildlife, and we do farm walks or whatever, or just let you get on with it.
If anybody's got any ideas of what, you know, might be a good thing to do for the bats, then we're up for that. Bat boxes, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. And finally, Pia says, how on earth do the two of you find the time and energy to do all the things that you do?
You don't have children.
Yeah, and I gave up a full-time job. So.
Yeah. So I think anybody who manages to do anything and have children is amazing, personally, because yeah, they just seem to take up so much time. We feel incredibly blessed to be here and incredibly lucky, and I think that's just really energizing for us. Yeah.
And the other thing, which I don't quite understand with sort of proper farmers, so to speak, in terms of having less livestock is actually less work and more expensive. You're not chasing around hundreds of sheep all over the place all the time. They are kind of look after themselves most of the time. So it's it's actually, as well as being less or more profitable because you're not spending so much money on them, you're also not spending so much time. So you got time to do other things.
Like go out.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a few messages saying thank you for lovely and inspiring talk. It's quite nice to have a positive talk, and the back group have said that they'll be in touch.
Yay!
I think people will be in touch about moth traps as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
that's really nice.
Well, our contact details are on the website if you haven't got them, so, and all through Facebook or stuff. So,
and we hope we'll see you people for the walks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You want to finish off?
Yeah. You said you're incredibly blessed to be there. I think we're incredibly blessed to have you there as custodians of the farm. And it was quite interesting. We were talking before about Country File that was on yesterday, and Adam scratching his head about the new agri-environment scheme. And there was quite a few of the answers to the questions that he was asking that you've come forward with during tonight's talk. And I think you're way ahead of the game in terms of managing the farm for wildlife and in a holistic way. It's quite inspirational, and it's an inspirational place to come to. The whole atmosphere is fantastic, including the pigs eating your picnic.
Bless the pig.
So I'd just like to say thank you very much, Mark and Naomi, for a wonderful talk and really interesting and stimulating talk and debate. So thank you very much.
Thank you.